In this video, I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of Android. So many of you have probably already interacted with an Android device at one point in time or another. But nonetheless, I still wanted to give you an overview as to what exactly Android is and maybe some, nitty-gritty stuff that you didn't necessarily know about it before we start developing applications. Some stuff that you want to maybe keep in the back of your mind when we go ahead and start developing, like I said, our applications. So let's go ahead and move on. So what is Android? Well, Android is a mobile operating system currently developed by Google. Android is open source. And that open source mentality is what allows HTC, Samsung, Motorola, all those guys to actually take Android and go ahead and modify it, right? And they modify it, and that's why we have different versions of Android running on each one of those different hardware manufacturers, right? Because Google actually encourages them to do that. Google also allows, lone developers to go ahead and modify Android and, release that to people as well, right? All this stuff is encouraged by Google. That's what this open source mentality means. Great. So Android architecture is roughly divided into 5 sections consisting of Linux kernel, native libraries, Android runtime, application frameworks, and then lastly, applications. So now let's go ahead and actually break down each one of those layers in our Android architecture. So our Linux kernel interacts with the Android hardware and contains all the essential hardware drivers. It also provides abstraction layer, or rather an abstraction layer between software and hardware. So this is the very basis of Android, right? This is kind of as it says, the kernel, right? It's kind of the nucleus of Android. This is what everything else is built off of. So libraries. Our libraries are core-proven libraries that handle specific types of data. Some examples include SQLite, Surface Manager, Media Framework, WebKit, and OpenGL. So these are kind of, libraries that have been tested and proven and other things that Android has bundled with its operating system that we interact with, right? So, for example, SQLite is, a library that allows us to manage or interact with databases very efficiently, right? Our WebKit that I mentioned allows us to, render web pages in an efficient manner and all that kind of good stuff. OpenGL is used to render 2D and 3D graphics. Great, so let's move on. Android runtime, the type of Java virtual machine used in Android to run Android applications. It's optimized for low processing power and low memory environments. So, I don't know how many of you know this already, but Java uses something called a Java virtual machine that takes bytecode and it goes and translates that using the Java virtual machine. Well, Android has taken a specific Java virtual machine, as I've said, that's optimized for low processing power and low memory environments, which is really good when we're dealing with mobile devices, right? Because with mobile devices, we don't have a lot of processing power and we don't have a lot of memory, right? So as I said, they kind of grabbed a custom virtual machine and they bundled it with Android to make it more efficient. So our application framework. Our application framework is building blocks that our application directly interact with. So these programs manage basic functions of the phone, such as phone calls and resource management. So these are the tools or the blocks that we're going to go ahead and grab and utilize when we are working with or building our application. So say we want to go ahead and make an application that deals with managing phone calls. Well, we go ahead and we grab the package for phone management that Android's included. Or maybe we want to, interact with the location, right, of an Android device. Well, we go ahead and we grab the location package, right? So that's what our application framework is, right? It's essentially these little bundled packages that deal with specific portions of our device. So lastly, we have our applications. Our applications are programs that utilize all of the above to create new functionality for our devices. So that's where we come in, right? That's where we go ahead and actually program specific functionality, which is later called an application. So now let's actually see how all of these things are visualized. So I'm going to move on here. So you'll notice at the very bottom, as I said, we have the Linux kernel. And the Linux kernel, as I said, interacts with all of the hardware, right? It provides a layer of abstraction with our hardware. So you'll notice that That's our lowest layer, right? That's the layer that all of the other layers rely on, right? That's our layer that's in the red there. So right above that, we have our libraries that we talked about, which, as I said, are libraries that have been proven and tested and are included with Android. So we have that OpenGL, WebKit. That's that green portion. Right off to the right is our Android runtime. That's that Dalvik Art runtime that, as I said, it is optimized for low power and low memory situations, right? Great. So above that, we have our application framework, which, as I said, allows us to, interact with, the location of our phone, or, our, the telephony manager, which is how we make phone calls and manage all that kind of good stuff. That's the little packages or blocks that we're going to go ahead and grab and interact with when we want to do any one of those specific types of things. So that's that blue portion right off to the right above our green portion. And then right above that is the applications. Those are all the things that we're going to create. And you'll notice that it says home, contacts, phone, and browser. Those are default applications that Google has actually, or Android, I should say, has actually already created for us. So that was a brief overview of Android, guys. I hope you learned something and you actually have a greater understanding of how everything is working together now.